All right. So we get to do this panel at the perfect time. I think most of you may have heard about the incredible exit story for OrganOx, a company out of Oxford that recently was acquired by Terumo for $1.5 billion. One of our industry's more amazing success stories. And with me on stage is Oern and Sam. Oern is the board chair of the company, and then Sam is a key late-stage investor that came in. And so let me quickly, if you don't know, OrganOx is a story. It's a company in organ preservation focused on the liver, and they have there's a couple of big problems with liver and liver transplant. First, there's not enough of them, and right now they were harvesting them with putting the livers on ice. And basically, I call it a heart-lung machine that they created, but it's for the liver. And so they can keep a liver in great condition and use it up to 24 hours after it's been harvested. And they can also perform diagnostics on it. Prior to OrganOx, there's an incredibly high number of livers that were discarded because they either took too long or they couldn't tell how good the liver was. Now they know how good the liver is. They can keep it alive and have dramatically increased the number of liver transplants that have happened. And then I want to get into the platform technology. This technology can go a lot of different places with it as well. And I'm going to pick up on something Carrie just spoke about, how you look at all these companies, and what do you say? 95% of them are dogs, and it could be true. And I think somebody can look at a company, like Oern can come in and look at a company, and he can develop a vision for it and develop that vision for success. I don't know how the investors viewed OrganOx before Oern arrived, about 5 years ago, 4 years ago, five years ago. And so keep that in mind of pulling in the right executive chair that's got really good vision and can help tell the story. I'm not saying that OrganOx would have been highly successful without him, but it was vital to what happened. So I'm going to let both these guys introduce themselves and tell a little bit of their story.
Go ahead, Oern, go first.
I'm Stuge, MD, MBA, previously president of Medtronic. I worked from a board perspective on many companies, 10 exits now, 3 unicorns. So it's the third one.
So I'm Samuel Levy. I'm one of the founders of LAUXERA Capital Partners. We're a Paris and San Francisco-based healthcare-focused growth buyout investment firm. My background, I'm American by birth. I am a medical doctor like Oern. I built a medical device company from an idea in a napkin to $64 million of revenue, and then founded my investment firm where we're now managing about $750 million. We're investing out of a Fund 2 now. And OrganOx was one of our Fund 1 investments.
Nice. So Oern, why don't you walk us through how you got OrganOx?
Happy to do. I'd like to start with giving credit to the founders who had the vision to develop an automatic machine perfusion device which could replicate near physiological condition for a donor organ outside the human body. And as you mentioned, Roger, that would mean that, you don't have to operate 24/7, 365. You can basically put the organ on the machine, and then next day you come in and you look at, for example, the liver, how is the lactate, it is, clearing and the bile production going up, etc. So you have a functional organ. And then you can do it during daytime with all the staff is there, etc., which makes it much better for the, staff, surgeons, anesthesiologists, etc. And, we saw that the complication rates dropped 50%. Utilization of organs went up significantly, and that's, there's shortage, so that's an important part. So it was big added value there. Now, they launched in Europe, and 12 years out, they were running out of money, and there was a fundraising, and BDF with Team Maria came in and topped up the funding under one condition, that they hire an independent chair, and that's how I came in. This was in November 2020. You know, COVID, I wanted to meet the founders and the CEO, Craig Marshall. So the only place we could meet was in a hotel room in Stockholm, Sweden, you know. Anyway, we were there. And then the business after 12 years made 2.7 million in revenue. Or 2.4 million in revenue, 27% gross margin, and they lost 7 million. And then at the meeting, they told me that, by the way, we did hear that we missed the primary endpoint on the pivotal trial, the FDA trial. So, well, we did a lot of things the coming 5 years, which led to revenue multiplying 45 times. We moved gross margin from 27% to 83%, and we have about 20% EBITDA margin this year. And we sold the company for 1.5 billion. So it was a steep rise.
Nice. And then you got to a later stage, and you were seeking capital.
Perhaps before we go there, it might be interesting to say what are the things we did to really take it.
Okay.
Yeah. And the first, I think, was to fix the regulatory part. And they missed the primary endpoint because they had gone for a superiority, endpoint. But they did meet the non-inferiority endpoint. And we have a competitor, Transmedics, who had just been approved based on non-inferiority. So we hired a really good regulatory consultant who argued the point that, here we have one which has been approved based on non-inferiority. We have also the same, why don't we get approval? Which we did. That was the number one big,
the right
really
person.
Quickly.
Right people.
Very quickly.
Right?
No, there's a right consultant. Yeah. Anyway, then the next one was to fix the price. 27% gross margin doesn't work. So I then went through hire consulting company to help us with the pricing in the US. There was a lot of pushback from the board and some people. So it was not good enough with one. We had another one, and then I hired LEK to do a launch plan for the US, including price, and they did a very good job. And there we ended up with the price right. And I will also say that it is crucially important that innovative companies in medtech and everywhere, I would say, deserve a fair share of the added value that we deliver. And if you price it too low, we don't take that, it's hurting everybody. And I'd like to say one more example on that, if I may. I was president of Medtronic Cardiac Surgery, where I also founded Medtronic Structural Heart and came up with the vision to develop a percutaneous heart valve, which we did, and we launched the first percutaneous heart valve in the world, the Melody valve, in 2006, which meant that we had to set the price in the market. The marketing and the product management people came up with what should the price be? Okay, about the same as a surgical valve, $6,000. I say, oh, well, I understand the rationale, but why don't we go out and check what the cost is for these children that is, the target for this valve today in US, UK, and Germany. And it turned out these children had to go through 3 operations, and that cost $100,000. So with that, I said, okay, the price is $25,000. So we launched it at $25,000 in Medtronic at the time. That sets the stage for the industry, and everybody has, benefit from that since. So anyway, that's another example of where we need a fair price to make it work. And for the OrganOx part, not only do we reduce complications, we save money about 10 to 20,000 per operation. So it is a good value proposition for all parties involved, and that's very important.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. That's important because a lot of times founders.
But then I like to come to you thereafter. After you've done that, I needed to launch in the US. We needed to find the right leader for the US. And then I called, of course, my favorite headhunter, Roger. I said, I need help. Yeah. And you came up with Rupa Basu, which has been absolutely a stellar hire. She's outstanding.
Yeah.
And she deserves a lot of credit for what happened in terms of the revenue growth.
Thank you for that. So those who don't know, I'm in the retained executive search business for device companies, both in Europe and the United States. The interesting thing about Rupa is she was in a process before that with another company that was very similar, and the board was not as experienced in med tech. They looked at her, they didn't see it, but Oern did because of his experience. And so I'm going to go back to the whole idea of having the right board, how critical that is to your process. Inexperienced board members, they kind of live in more of a box. Somebody's got to check all the boxes, but they don't have that intuitive feel and instinct that comes with years of experiences. So a credit to all those senior people that serve on boards. I think it really helps. Well, let's move into Sam once here with
the next important.
Yeah, very very important. And so as companies move down the path, getting the right investors is so important. It's not about getting money. It's not getting the best term sheet. It's getting the right investors. And so I'm going to guess OrganOx had some better term sheets, but they went with Sam probably for a very good reason. Maybe you could speak to that before Sam starts speaking about why. Why Sam? What was that process like?
Well, OrganOx is very Oxford-based, with Oxford investors. Nothing bad about that, but I felt strongly that we need to diversify the cap table and get some people with U.S. experience and, money and basically board experience. So I approached Sam and said, hey, why don't you take a look at this? And to your credit, you took it on. You went on and did your own research and came with a term sheet unsolicited to the board. So, first price was a bit too low, but then it came and we invested, and this has been fantastic. And part of the really critical part of the success story, I would say.
I think that there's this thinking that like teams can replace in-person meetings. I think we're all here because that's not true. And I remember at the JP Morgan conference in San Francisco in 23, I had a meeting with Oern. Oern had told me about OrganOx for several years before that, saying, this is the most exciting company I've been a part of. And I had said, Oern, we're interested in investing. No, we don't need the money. We don't need the money. And then randomly in January of 23, I surfaced OrganOx again, and Oern said, well, you know what? Maybe there is an opportunity this time. And so I built a team and within my colleagues on our investment team, we started working. We made an offer. As to Oern's point, the offer was rejected. I thought when I first heard that, well, it's a shame this is over, kind of slept on it. I thought this is such an outstanding company. Let's improve the price. Let's do it. So I improved the price, but I asked for a long exclusivity period. And what that allowed me to do is fly to the U.S. and meet a substantial number of the company's customers. One of the things that Oern said earlier, I'm not sure if everyone picked up on this, but despite growing 146% revenue growth CAGR from our entry to the exit to Terumo, the company also grew profitably with a 20% cash EBITDA margin. And there's how is that possible in medtech? Well, it's possible because 75% of liver transplants that are performed in the United States are performed in about 60 hospitals. And at the time of our entry, there were I think about 11 or 12 customers. And so we were able to meet about half of them in the U.S. And we had the customer level sales data, which for a commercial stage investor is very, very important to see in-store, same store sales growth. And we saw outstanding same store sales growth with no churn across basically the entire installed base. The first question I asked Oern is, how is this company interesting? This is a capital equipment business. How is this investable? Oern said, no. 99% of the revenue comes from the consumable. So that the company basically created an outstanding go-to-market model in the U.S. where what we call the retained unit, the capital is basically leased to the hospital, concomitantly with a contract to buy essentially $1 million of consumables in the first year. And the consumables have a very, very high gross margin. The overall blended gross margin is 85%. And so that business model where, again, customers are ordering in January, they're ordering in February, we love as investors and help deliver the outstanding exit multiple that we achieve with Terumo. So, we did the work, we met the customers. And if you think about transplant, there are donors and there are recipients. You can imagine that there are good donors, bad recipients. Well, when we talked to customers, what we realized, customers were mostly using the product for, bad donors going into bad recipients. But what we realized was there was incredible traction, primarily because the technology lets the surgeons avoid working in the hospital all night. Suddenly transplant surgery is something you can do all day. All of a sudden, the kind of gateway drug for the device was the bad donor, bad recipient. But over time, we observed the technology being used even in good donors and good recipients. And that commercial traction at the account level gave us the confidence to show up to pay what felt like a very uncomfortable entry price. But, now feels intelligent, but at the time was a bit controversial in my team.
Yeah. How many? I don't know if everybody picked up on that. There's a minimum set for a customer. They need to commit to $1 million. I can say that, right? They need to commit to $1 million, which is maybe X number of procedures a year.
25.
25 procedures.
Yes.
And so it's these centers focus on it. So they focus on this, and it's a remarkable. Okay, so now let's transition it once into there's two interesting things, I think. First, how did Terumo ever come up as a possible acquirer? And then I'd love to dive into typically sometimes people hire investment bankers and they get a bunch of people bidding, and that's you get a good outcome, but it's an incredible amount of lift. And how many companies are ready to fork over $1.5 billion and take on a new market? So tell us a story about how Terumo came to be, and why just Terumo? Why not go out and talk to everybody?
I think we should maybe I think one of the main reasons that Terumo appeared was because of the outstanding commercial traction that the company delivered. I think it might be worth talking for a second about how we accomplished that, what it took, even from a team standpoint, working with Roger to get that trajectory. Because I think that was absolutely critical. I guess what I wanted to say was when we showed up and made our investment, the team supporting OrganOx was outstanding, and they were outstanding people to go from ideation of the technology through to where we were. But I think the reason why Terumo appeared was because of the trajectory.
Yeah, it started actually before, because Terumo is one of the critical suppliers we have. So they knew the company from the very beginning. And there, Craig Marshall, the CEO, had a good relationship with one guy, in the supply chain, area of Terumo, and they knew it from there. When that's also why they were so interested in looking at or investing in the round that we did, funding round we did. But clearly they also saw the orders going up quite drastically, so that probably had a influence on their interest, I guess.
Oh, for sure. And I think what Oern, one of the things Oern told me when we started our discussion was I had the very privilege early in my career to grow a medtech business more than 100% year over year from a top line standpoint. And, that growth brings enormous, I would say, stress, not only to the sales and marketing function, but all the other functions that support the sales and marketing function. So the supply chain, you have more kappas mechanically when you have a lot of growth. So the quality system, the regulatory team, when the complications occur in every business that we're in this conference. So when a complication occurs, do we report? Do we not report? How do we manage that stress in the regulatory function? And I think one of the partnerships we had with Roger, and a critical element for this was bringing on board the right people to lead these functions, not from the idea through regulatory approval phase, which requires, I think, a different set of skills, but the commercial scale phase where you have to really industrialize processes.
Yeah.
And so that was a critical function.
Totally. I always, like to overhire for positions. So we hire for the future, not for the present. And then you are very good at understanding the demand and come up with, candidates. And, I started the Rupa, and, you hire one good one. They typically know other good ones. And then that is how it goes. And they know what the standard should be. So you get into the right trajectory right away.
A's hire A's and B's hire C's.
Yeah. And the CFO story was kind of an interesting one where we were marching down the path of looking for a CFO that had the skill set and ability to take the company public. And so we were looking for that public company CFO, scoured the country, and we flew, I think, our top 4 people to an organ transplant conference in Florida where Oern and Rupa and Craig were at, and the founders were there, and the team interviewed, the group interviewed there, but they're all really good and they're all in great places today. But I told Oern and Sam, there's just one more person that you really, really need to meet. He has already said no to us 3 times, but he's going to be at JP Morgan. And I have one of those rooms there, the suites, meeting suites that I spend $1,000 a day on. And I invited him to come by for lunch to meet Sam and Oern. And he said, okay, I don't have anything to lose. And he's a public company CFO at the time, not looking very happy. He sat down with these 2 guys. And at the end of it, he couldn't resist the story. And he made the switch. And I was speaking to Sam the other day about this whole idea of getting multiple suitors. And he said something really interesting, that when you've got a strong team and you've got a CFO with the capability of taking a company public, the threat of the IPO helps balance out the pricing.
Sure.
So you don't need a bunch of people competing because they know what the IPO is going to look like. They can figure that out. And so if you don't have that IPO possibility, I think your offer is going to be a lot lower. But anyway, so it's a credit to knowing the right people and getting the right people aboard.
So Roger, like continuing to answer your question about how did Terumo kind of appear here, I think one of the really important milestones for the company was actually a private financing that we organized at the end of last year. So I remember I have 4 children, and I was at Parrot World with them just outside of Paris where I live, where all of a sudden I had this kind of panic. I read the monthly revenue growth numbers for OrganOx, which were just outstanding, more than 100% year over year growth. And I thought to myself, I entered this thing as a late stage investor. There are all these early stage investors that funded this thing 15 years ago at a share price much, much lower than mine. Oh my God, if a Terumo shows up or someone like that and wants to pay a kind of normal medtech multiple, there's going to be huge pressure for me to sell. But I think this is just an outstanding generational company. So we've got to find a way to be able to give it the legs it needs to be more ambitious. And so what the idea that Oern and I discussed and decided to pursue with our board was the notion of trying to take some pressure off for legacy shareholders and readjust the exit governance. So we ended up doing a $160 million round of financing, of which 25 was primary, 135 was secondary. and we collapsed the liquidation preferences. So the goal being to make the cap table very simple. And there was one share price paid for all the securities. There was no discount for the sellers, and we let sellers sell a lot of shares, which would generate a fantastic DPI, proceeds for them and their LPs. At the same time, we reset the drag rules for the exit. And so we put in place, my firm wrote a term sheet, which we put in the data room available for the future co-lead. And we mandated that in order to drag the new investors, there had to be a significant step up from the price that we were paying in that transaction. And that put in place a barrier that kind of it was an ambitious set of expectation. I thought was more of like a 26 or 27 number for the company. But when we ended up bringing in two strategics into the transaction, Intuitive Surgical and also Terumo, when they read the shareholder agreement, they knew what our expectations were. And when they saw the revenue trajectory of the business and realized that public markets were truly a credible threat, they had to make the decision whether to act now and just swallow the price or wait and maybe miss the opportunity. And I'm totally convinced that if we hadn't done that transaction and reset the exit governance, the opening offer from the buyer universe would have been substantially lower.
Definitely.
Well, Sam, let me simplify something. What Sam threw at is a lot of stuff I think most people may not understand because of
Sorry.
the world he lives in. But basically, he's got a whole set of early investors that have been around for a long time. They had a chance to exit. So anytime you get a lot of our medtech companies, they can get tired. You got people who have been in it for a long time. And I love the idea of organizing something to allow these early investors to get their exit way before everybody else, and then they can move on. And then you clean up your cap table. Your cap table looks a lot more presentable to both for an IPO and the larger investors coming in late. Yep. So it keeps it simple. Otherwise, it gets so complicated with too many rights, and they walk away because it doesn't.
Yeah, this was a critical move. We wanted to diversify the cap table and get more kind of crossover type of investors in, and U.S. presence and well-known name in the U.S., etc., to be credible on the IPO file.
Absolutely.
So that was one. I also, management had been in there for a while as well. So I encourage people to sell up to a certain percentage of their share to kind of become a little more patient. Otherwise, you're too keen to take an early offer. Maybe. Yeah. But it was not a bad idea to do. And so
we routinely do that. I love buying secondary from founders. Yeah, I think they make better decisions as a result.
Yeah. So we executed on that.
So one of the things I hear about every once in a while, and it just kills me when I hear this, is companies they're looking to be bought, and so they're focused on working with a strategic to be acquired. And a true story of somebody that I know that goes through the whole process. Everybody in the corporation and this larger strategic agreed to buy. They agreed on the price. They're just waiting for the final sign off of the CEO of this major strategic. And that person got to that person's desk, despite everybody wanting to do it. He said, "No, we're not going to do it." After a lot of work for a long period of time, and I said, "Well, did you ever meet up with this person? Did you ever speak to him?" No, never met him. And I think it's so important that your key decision maker, somebody has to meet it. It doesn't have to be the CEO. It could be somebody on the board, which means getting the right board. If you have the right board and they have the right relationships above, great things happen. And so tell us a little bit about Terumo, and I think this is masterful, is making sure that you got time with the acquirer before they finally pulled the trigger to help that process. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I met with Hikaru, the CEO of Terumo, and he's head of business development, Ken, together with Craig Marshall. And, in Singapore during a conference where they met with several of our customers, I went to our symposium and we were quite impressed. it's interesting. Japanese and especially Terumo, they are really thorough. We saw that in the due diligence, which was, I think 3 times what's normal. They really go through everything in a very serious manner. And, on this meeting, it was, they had in advance asked for my CV, Craig's CV, etc. And then it was about a long discussion about getting to know, me and what I did as a child and this and that. Right. Yeah. So it was very, an exercise where we actually
You knew each
ended up with a
other,
very good fit.
built a trust.
With a trust base. It was absolutely super important. So that was most of the dinner was about that. Then I also, of course, knew that Terumo had bid on Inari and lost out, and that Terumo is not used to make too many acquisitions. That bankers said they do it every 10 years, and this was now, obviously on the agenda of the CEO. And then I also knew that they could have the potential to vertically integrate the supply chain to 98%. And supply chain management is difficult, as you mentioned, and also for quality, that is a critical part. And we knew that was the case. And I, was not shy about this. And as well as mentioning the fact that if you look at the companies in the medtech field, which has acquired, systematically, like Boston and Stryker, look at their PE versus the ones that have not, it's half, So I think that that set the stage very nicely. And then I also ran the process together with Hikaru, kind of shepherded this process in a very efficient way, trust-based. So that's helpful, I think.
Yeah.
And we had very good help from our banker, advisor, and lawyers. Also like
they did an outstanding job.
Yeah.
So it sounds like even I was thinking when you were telling that story how if there's companies out there like Inari and there's other companies that people are trying to acquire, maybe Histosonics was recently acquired, finding out who lost might be a good thing because they're a little pissed off that they didn't get what they wanted. And they're going to come at it a little more aggressively next time. I'm sure the investment bankers know who those people are, but I like that angle. I know that wasn't the intent, but
I have a buddy that spent like 30 years doing at Goldman Sachs doing M&A, and he told me they always make the list of the most desperate buyers.
Yeah.
Who are the most desperate buyers? Those are the people that we want to talk to first.
Yeah. And so I want to shift topics just a bit here because I've got 2 very, very experienced medtech pros up here. So I don't know if you guys know, Samuel started a company called Lurion. So he's actually a founder CEO. And Oern spent a lot of time on the corporate side, but he's really spent the last 20 years working with early stage medtech. And I get to see a lot of medical device companies that are led by the founder CEO. This founder CEO, not everybody is like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates who take it on forever. There's very few medtech stories of the founder going all the way. Tim Herbert, I think, Inspire is one. But most of the time, the founders, if they truly believe in their technology, are best off at some point in time to hand the reins over to somebody who can scale, somebody who's seen scale, knows how to scale. They get it because usually a founder has never scaled before. And so it could be a first time doing it. So give us some of your thoughts, advice around a founder CEO, when the right time is to transition. How do they know? How do they know they can't carry it on forever like Jeff Bezos has? Or Bill Gates, and how do they know when to let it go? And tell us a bit about your thoughts on that whole process.
I think it's hard. I think it's really hard. I think self-knowledge is really important. I think a lot of people that are successful often recognize what their strengths are and what their development areas are. And I think your point is right. Like medtech as a business, it's different than selling books on a website. You sell books on a website. The next thing you got to do is you sell some other product category. Medtech, the commercial, the development of companies, the skills that are needed are so different at each step, more different, I would argue, than expanding a marketplace. I mean, Jeff Bezos, I don't want to, what he's going to do. I'm not saying it's easy, but in medtech, there's the whole R&D phase, then there's the clinical phase, then there's the regulatory phase, there's the commercial phase. Those phases are so different, and it's unusual that people that are brilliant at the engineering are also brilliant at the commercialization. The only thing I would argue is that no one cares more about the companies than the founders. So there's also, that the problem is that when things go bad, when you're an investor, the operators, the entrepreneurs, the employees you hire, they can leave and go work for someone else. At the end of the day, you're left with the equity. And I think the founders had that same mentality. This was my baby. I am not going to let it sink. And you lose that when you transition from their leadership to the next chapter of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Oern?
Yeah, I think, it's exactly right. The founders really care about the business. That's why it's also difficult to let go. Now we had in OrganOx 2 co-founders who are part-time employees, so they couldn't do everything. And of course, at the same time, don't want to let go. So it's a challenge, and some issues came up. And I remember once I mentioned the founder syndrome, and I said, well, what's the founder syndrome? And then I just went to ChatGPT, took a definition of founder syndrome and sent to the board, and that, boom, immediately came a meeting with the founders, But the thing is, then I made it not personal.
Yeah.
It was basically ChatGPT, founder syndrome. This is a normal thing in India. It was a good, good discussion.
Yeah. Not me saying it. I didn't say it.
Right.
Oh, great.
Anyway.
Yeah. No, it's good for relationship advice too.
Yeah.
When you send it on, I didn't say it.
Yeah.
So, okay, we have a minute. Can we take a question from the audience if somebody has one? Anybody have any questions they'd love to ask these two gentlemen, either about OrganOx or about business in general?
This is more from the clinical standpoint with commercialization, but I think it's an amazing story. There's been a huge medical issue that's been solved. Can you talk a little bit about your customers and the impact this is having on patients and the 60 hospitals in particular in the U.S. and throughout the globe?
Yeah, I went. I like to go to the big conferences, and one of the first one I went to was women in transplantation, and I tell you that was a depressing session. They were talking about that to give up all the hobbies, the this and the that, and the recruitment for women especially women in transplantation, were going down. Now, 2 years later, what an optimism! Because now it's a daytime surgery, and suddenly it's very popular. Interesting surgery can be done on the daytime. That totally flipped things around for them. So that's a very important factor, I think. And then the fact is also that complication rates dropped 50%. And one of our biggest customers in the U.S., one of the, can I say? No, Cleveland Clinic. They had before they started to use the Mitra device, they observed 30%, about 30%. It's not a secret because the guy presented it in a conference. So about 30% sudden cardiac arrest during transplantation. Can you imagine 4 o'clock in the morning, you are there doing the transplantation, and suddenly the patient has sudden cardiac arrest. So then, after they started with the Mitra, it dropped to 0. So that just two examples.
And I would say for patients, patients that get a liver in the United States have like weeks of life. And the overall survival of patients that get a liver transplantation, roughly at 1 year, 90%, at 5 years, 80%, at 10 years, 70%. So it's truly the gift of life. You're taking people from death's doorstep to a pretty good quality of life for most people for decades.
Wonderful. Well,
Okay.
thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you sharing the story. And I'm sure you can stop them at any time during the conference and they'll tell you more. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.